September 1998. The night began like any other in the silent valleys of the Appalachians, but before midnight, the sky shattered all logic. A deep, living green flash, like the heart of liquid emerald, spread for miles, painting mountains, lakes, and metal roofs with a light that seemed to breathe. The residents came out of their homes without understanding. Some knelt, others just looked, as if witnessing the moment when the world decides to change its skin. The radios fell silent. The city lights went out in sequence. The air smelled of iron and rain, and those who still had a watch saw the hands stop. In that electric chaos, on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, a simple man lit the oldest lantern in his house, the only one left. His name was Tom Miller, and for 3 years he had lived between the sound of the wind and the memory of a woman who had taught him to tend to the small lights. Since his wife had passed, the lantern's flame had never gone out. Tom said it was the heart of the house, a way to keep alive the memory that love, even wounded, still has a voice. And on that strange night, the fire's glow seemed different. The flame stretched, trembled, as if recognizing something distant. The wind blew from the north with a metallic hum. The leaves vibrated on the ground as if being pulled by an invisible current. And then came the sound. 3 knocks, dry, rhythmic. At the back door, Tom raised his eyes. No dog barked, no car passed. Intuition warned first, that wasn't human. He tried to convince his body to stay still, but his heart had already decided. Each step he took toward the door seemed to echo within his own soul, as if a part of him knew that the world would never be the same after what he was about to see. When the latch turned and the wood creaked, the air seemed to freeze. Before him, 7 tall figures, wrapped in a pale light, watched him in silence. They weren't ghosts or lost people. They had form, they had weight, but there was something about them that escaped understanding. The green of the sky reflected in their eyes, the same green, the same living, impossible glow that took over the mountains. Tom felt time stop. No sound, no wind, just that suspended instant between fear and curiosity. The instant when life tests whether you trust your reason or your soul more. And it was there, on the edge between the unknown and the sacred, that the story began. For a moment, Tom thought his heart would escape through his throat. The air was dense, and the silence between him and those figures was almost tangible, as if the night itself were holding its breath. None of them moved, none of them tried to enter. They just watched, motionless like statues carrying centuries of weariness. Each face was different, one younger, another more wrinkled, another without defined contours. But there was something common to all, the gaze of someone who had walked too far. Gradually, fear gave way to a gentle curiosity. Tom felt that, for some reason he couldn't explain, they posed no danger. They seemed lost. And within him, an ancient force, perhaps the same one that made him keep the lantern lit night after night, pushed him to step aside, opening space at the door. With a calm gesture, he pointed inside. They entered one by one. No sound of footsteps, no sound of clothing, just the faint flicker of light on the floor, revealing luminous trails, like stardust left by each movement. When the last one crossed the threshold, the wind outside stopped. The interior of the house, simple and silent, took on a different glow. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the metallic air that came from them. A scent that recalled rain and iron, but also something sweet and clean, like the perfume of the air on another planet. Tom, trying to disguise his nervousness, grabbed the mugs and began to serve. His hands trembled, and yet the gesture felt right. It was all he knew how to do, offer warmth. None of them drank, but the steam rising from the cups seemed to fascinate them. One of them, the one with the clearest eyes, touched the vapor as if rediscovering a memory. Another ran his fingers over the table, exploring the textures as if they were codes. A third stopped before the portrait hanging on the wall. A woman smiling, holding a lit lantern. It was Tom's wife. The visitor stood there, looking at the image for long seconds. Then, without saying anything, he extended his hand and with a light gesture, made the flame of the lantern on the table grow larger without touching it. The glow spread across the walls, reflecting on the metal of the kettles and the windows. The house that had seemed dead now breathed. Tom swallowed hard. There was no fear. There was something deeper, almost sacred. He realized that the air had changed rhythm, as if the entire environment pulsed. Even the dog, which until then had stayed hidden under the table, lifted its head and approached, pressing its muzzle against the foot of one of the figures, who responded with a light touch on the animal's forehead. Time passed without anyone marking the hours. The wall clock remained stopped, but life inside continued. Tom didn't know if he should ask who they were or what they wanted, but deep down he understood. They weren't there by chance. Perhaps they were fleeing or searching for something, but there was a quieter truth hanging in the air, that those presences weren't strange. They were distant mirrors, echoes of the same kind of solitude. And in that instant, sitting at the table with beings who seemed made of light and memory, Tom felt that the entire universe was watching him, and that in some way his small wooden house, forgotten in the middle of the Appalachians, had become a refuge for travelers from worlds no one had ever imagined existed. Before we continue, if this story is gripping you, if you want to understand what really happens when the impossible knocks on our door, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and comment what you would do in Tom's place. These stories only keep coming to you because there are those who believe in the light behind them. The storm continued to roar outside, but inside the house the sound was different. There was a soft hum, like an electric field that doesn't hurt, a vibration that seemed to come from the walls, the floor, Tom's very breath. He watched the visitors, trying to decipher what they were. There was no aggression, just a serene, almost melancholic presence. It was as if they carried the weight of entire worlds on their shoulders, the weight of everything lost when a planet dies. One of them approached the window. With the tip of his fingers, he drew something on the fogged glass from the humidity. As soon as the touch happened, the glass lit up. Not with the lantern's reflection, but with images that sprang from within the material itself, as if it remembered other landscapes. Before Tom's eyes, impossible visions opened. A sky with 2 moons, frozen oceans that gleamed like cracked mirrors, glass deserts where the wind left trails of light. Tom recoiled, breathless. That wasn't a dream, it was memory. The figures didn't speak, but he understood. They were showing where they came from, and everything he saw was destruction. Cities undone, colossal structures covered in ashes, what remained of a lost home. The images lasted only a few minutes, but left a deep sensation. They weren't invaders. They were survivors. As he watched, Tom's heart tightened. That pain was familiar. He too knew the feeling of losing everything, of seeing his own life crumble and still continue breathing. When his wife died, part of him died with her. Since then, every night was a silent battle against the void. And now, in an incomprehensible way, 7 beings from another world seemed to understand that exactly. One of the visitors approached the lantern. The flame flickered and for an instant formed something like a symbol, a circle cut by a vertical line. Tom noticed that the fire's glow seemed to react to them, as if there was a silent communication between lights. One of the visitors extended his hand and pointed to the flame, then to the sky outside, which still pulsed in shades of green. The understanding came suddenly, like a snap. They had found Tom's house because of the lantern. That small fire, lit night after night for 3 years, emitted an imperceptible vibration, a weak but constant field that crossed space and time. That was what they followed, signals of light, beacons of hope. Tom stood still. The idea was absurd, but his heart knew it was true. His flame, his simple flame, had been a call. The pain turned into routine had become a beacon for those wandering in the darkness. That revelation disarmed him. For years, he thought he kept the lantern lit just out of longing, as an act of love for the one who was gone. But now he understood that that love had crossed borders that not even death could erase. The fire that guarded his wife's memory was the same fire that had guided lost souls through the cosmos. The visitors approached the table. One of them touched Tom's chest, and for an instant he saw lights pulsing under his skin, like living veins of energy. The lantern responded with a flare. Outside, the wind stopped. Inside, the air became light, as if the house itself had exhaled relief. That man, who for so long had thought himself invisible, now realized that the universe saw him, that no flame, however small, goes unnoticed. The night advanced, but time no longer followed the clock. It seemed to run in another direction, in a silent rhythm that united memories, worlds, and ancient pains. Tom was sitting at the table when one of the visitors, the youngest among them, approached with something in his hands. It was a small metallic object, circular, cold as wet silver. Without a word, he placed it in Tom's hands and made a gentle gesture, indicating that he should hold it firmly. As soon as the metal touched his skin, the air around it changed. Lines of light began to swirl, rising and falling like liquid ribbons. The glow condensed and formed images, not in space but inside Tom's own mind. He saw himself many years before in a rescue uniform, clothes dirty with soot and hands trembling. The sound of sirens, the smell of smoke, and the heat of destruction invaded the environment, so real that he felt his chest burn. In the vision, there was a building on fire. Screams. Chaos. He carried people in his arms, trying to save them one by one. And then the oldest and most painful memory returned like a wave. His wife, trapped in the rubble, refusing to leave while there were still neighbors trapped upstairs. Tom saw her smile for the last time, handing him the lantern before disappearing into the flames. The tears came without warning. He had never told that story to anyone. He never said that she had died trying to save lives. He kept it all in silence, as if speaking would betray the memory. Now, before those beings, the memory returned with full force, and with it, a truth. The light he kept lit wasn't just a symbol of love, it was a plea for forgiveness. The visitors watched in silence. One of them extended his hand and, with an almost imperceptible touch, made a new image appear on the table. This time Tom saw another man, similar to him but not the same. Greyish skin, deep eyes, strange garments. In his arms, he carried an alien child, wrapped in a fabric with the same symbol Tom had seen before, the circle and the line. The man handed it to a group of beings, and on the cloth was something written in English. To those we couldn't save. Tom felt a shiver run through his entire body. It was as if his very soul recognized that gesture. The man in the images, whoever he was, carried the same pain, the same love, and the same guilt, a reflection of himself in another world. The beings looked at him, and Tom realized they didn't need to explain anything. They had come because they knew, because they recognized in him the echo of a universal gesture, that of someone who tries to save what they love, even if it costs their own peace. The fear, which before hid behind astonishment, dissolved. In its place, a different feeling arose, empathy. Those travelers wanted nothing. They sought no resources, no shelter, no pity. They just needed to remember what it was to be human. And in that instant, in a wooden house lost among mountains, an Earthman became the mirror that reflected the best of them. Tom wiped his face, breathed deeply, and for the first time in many years, felt light. Not because everything was resolved, but because he had been seen, truly seen. And perhaps that was all he had ever needed. Someone, in some corner of the universe, to recognize his light and silently say, "We understand." The hours blended, dissolving any notion of dawn. The storm outside had become a living force, roaring over the mountains, shaking the windows, sweeping trees as if the world were being rewritten outside. Still, inside the house, there was an impossible calm. The lantern flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and each oscillation of the flame seemed to reflect what was happening inside Tom. A silent battle between the fear of losing again and faith in something he didn't understand, but that filled him. The visitors were gathered at the table, watching the light waver. The oldest among them, a figure with a serene countenance and deep gaze, stood up. His body emitted a subtle glow, as if his very skin were made of stardust. He extended his hand over the lantern. The flame, which was about to go out, stabilized. For a few seconds, the fire seemed to hang in the air, suspended between the gesture and the miracle. Then, the glow expanded, flooding the house. Tom saw the impossible happen. The walls began to pulse in sync with the light, as if breathing. And on the wall, right above the table, a projection formed, the outline of a human heart. It beat in a constant rhythm, luminous, and each pulse made the lantern's fire respond. Heart and flame breathed together. The air became warm, pleasant. Tom's dog lay down near the door and fell asleep. The wind outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant. That small wooden space had become the center of a phenomenon that transcended any explanation. It wasn't a miracle of faith nor a prodigy of science. It was the result of a rare communion. The encounter between what is human and what is cosmic, between what breaks and what refuses to die. Tom watched everything in silence. With each second that passed, the storm inside him, the one that for years made him wake up in the middle of the night, with the memory of loss corroding his chest, began to yield. The tears that fell now weren't from pain, but from liberation. He understood finally that those presences hadn't come to take anything from him, but to give back meaning, to give back hope, to give back the breath of life that grief had taken away. For an instant, everyone stayed still. Only the sound of the living flame filled the air. One of the visitors placed his hand on Tom's shoulder and pointed to the luminous heart on the wall. With a slow gesture, he brought his finger to his own forehead, then to his chest, and finally to the lantern. 3 touches, 3 beats. It was like a silent reminder. What is inside manifests outside. What is outside reflects what you carry inside. Tom understood. The storm the world was facing outside was the same one he had faced inside for years. The collapse of machines, the silence of communications, the darkness in the cities. All of that was a mirror of humanity in inner collapse. That encounter, in truth, was a healing, not just for him, but for everything that had become disconnected from the essence of being alive. The flame continued steady. The visitors remained in a circle, each with their hands close to the lantern, sharing the same warmth. The entire house vibrated like a single heart, and Tom, at the center of it all, realized there was something deeply divine in that instant, the revelation that the universe is sustained by the small lights that stubborn hearts refuse to let go out. When the flash outside lit the mountains for the last time, he knew nothing would ever be the same. When the storm ceased, the silence that remained seemed alive. It wasn't absence of sound, it was presence of peace. Tom's house, still wrapped in a faint glow, seemed suspended between 2 worlds, that of Earth and that of something far beyond. Outside, the sky slowly opened, and the first colors of dawn tinted the horizon with shades of copper and lilac. The wind was light, the air pure, and the distant sound of trees dripping rain sounded like an ancient song, one only nature knows how to play after a night of purification. Tom stood up, without haste. The lantern still burned, serene in the center of the table. The 7 visitors remained motionless, standing, looking at the dawn through the fogged windows. There was no fear, no urgency, just that kind of silence that speaks more than any word, the silence that exists when everything has already been said and the heart finally understands. One of the visitors, the youngest, approached the window. With his finger, he slowly drew the symbol Tom had seen in the flame. The circle cut by a vertical line, but this time, inside the circle, the small being drew a flame. It was the complete symbol. Tom recognized it, and, without thinking, repeated the gesture beside him, imitating the stroke on the glass. When he finished, the symbol glowed in gold, pulsing once before disappearing. It was in that instant that Tom realized they were saying goodbye. The oldest walked up to him. His eyes, once cold and distant, now carried something familiar. Emotion. He raised his hand, touched Tom's chest, and with a soft glow, projected a sequence of images in the air. They were memories of moments past. Tom's woman laughing on the porch, the dog still a puppy, the lantern's fire lit on winter nights. But among these memories, there were others too. Fields of crystals on a distant planet, floating mountains, beings walking under double moons. And in all these images, the same flame appeared, the same lantern. Tom understood. The light he kept wasn't just his. It was a universal manifestation, a link between worlds. That flame that seemed so small had become a language, a way of saying there is still life to any lost soul among the dust of the stars. When the first ray of sun pierced the clouds and touched the window, the visitors began to change. The glow of their skins intensified. The outline of their bodies dissolved into translucent beams. The sound emanating from them was like the echo of a distant melody, something between a prayer and a whisper. Tom didn't try to stop them. He just watched, with a peaceful heart, as each of them dissolved into fragments of light that rose slowly, like golden dust floating toward the rising sun. The last to leave was the youngest, the one who had drawn the symbol. He looked at Tom one last time and, before disappearing, pressed his hand to the lantern. The flame grew, flickered, and then stabilized, brighter than before. Tom was left alone in the house, but the silence that remained wasn't empty. It was full. It was the kind of silence that comes when the soul finds its place. He went to the door, opened it, and looked at the valley. The mountains were covered in a veil of golden mist. Everything smelled of new beginnings. No tears, no sadness, just gratitude. He understood he was no longer alone. That the love he had lost and the light he kept burning had been understood and shared by existences beyond Earth. The universe had responded, and responded with tenderness. Tom went back inside, picked up the lantern in his hands, and smiled. The sun rose differently that day, and inside him something was born too. A silent certainty that every true flame, sooner or later, finds those who need its light. 10 years have passed since that night when the Appalachian sky changed colour. Time, as it always does, tried to turn the extraordinary into memory, but the memory refused to fade. The road leading to Tom Miller's old wooden house is now visited by the curious. Some come for faith, others for science, others for simple fascination with the inexplicable. They say that on certain nights, a light appears on top of the hill, a light that changes colour, now green, now blue, now golden, as if blinking in code. Some call it solar reflection, others remnant of a magnetic storm. But those who have truly been there know there's more. The air near that house has a different kind of energy. It's not fear nor mystery. It's reverence. It's like standing before something that doesn't need to be explained, just felt. Tom aged with serenity. He continued living alone, but solitude had become an old friend, not a burden. The lantern, still the same one, remained on the table, lit every night. But he no longer lit it out of habit, nor grief. Now he did it for purpose. Each flame was a message sent to some distant place, a silent reminder that light, once lit, never ceases to exist. On the table rested a thick notebook, bound in aged leather. Inside it, page after page filled with drawings he himself didn't remember making, maps with unknown constellations, symbols that glowed under certain lights, words in languages that didn't belong to Earth. He didn't know what they meant, but he felt they were important. They weren't just scribbles. They were traces, memories left by hands that perhaps weren't human. From time to time, Tom sat on the porch and looked at the horizon. Sometimes the wind brought soft sounds like distant voices. Other times, the dog, now old, would lift its head and look at the same point in the sky as if recognizing a call. And on each of those nights, Tom smiled. There was no longer fear of what lies beyond. There was understanding. Hanging on the wall, under the window, was a small wooden plaque he had made himself. The letters, carved with patience and simplicity, said, "For those still searching for the light." He believed that someone, somewhere, was still walking through the shadows, and that lantern, however small, could still serve as a guide. And so, while the world changed and stories became legends, Tom remained faithful to his ritual. At nightfall, he lit the wick, adjusted the glass, and watched the fire take shape. The golden reflection danced on the walls, projecting old memories, and he murmured to himself, "You're still out there, aren't you? I'm still here too." Outside, the wind passed through the mountains, carrying the flames' glow to where the eye couldn't reach, and whoever by chance crossed the road at that hour swore they saw a different light shining on the hill, alive, steady, constant. It was Tom's lantern, the beacon for those wandering in the dark, the reminder that even when everything seems extinguished, there is always someone, somewhere, keeping the flame alive. If this story touched you in some way, if you believe that there are still people, or beings, capable of keeping the light alive amid the darkness, leave your like, share this video, and write in the comments. The light remains lit. That way, this flame spreads even further, and stories like this find those who need to hear them.